Okay, welcome to our electronic committee of the whole meeting on October the 27th, 2020. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Regional Council is practicing physical distancing. In an attempt to speed things up, we've assigned a mover and seconder for all recommendations contained within the agenda package. I will read these out at the appropriate time, and then I will state the result of the vote. And I'll ask Mr. Brubaker now to perform the roll call.
Chair Redmond.
Here.
Councillor Armstrong.
Here.
Councillor Clark.
Here.
Councillor Erb.
Here.
Councillor Foxton.
Here.
Councillor Galloway.
Here.
Councillor Harris.
Here.
Councillor Jaworski.
Here.
Councillor Jowett. Councillor Jowett.
She's here, but her internet keeps going in and out.
She's having internet problems.
Okay.
Councillor Verbanovic is here.
Councillor Kiefer.
Here.
Councillor Lawrence.
Here.
Councillor McGarry.
Here.
Councillor Nowak.
Here.
Councillor Shantz.
Here.
Councillor Strickland. Councillor Strickland. And Councillor Vrvanovich.
I am here, but I'll have to be leaving early.
Okay. Councillor Jowett.
I'm also, yeah, sorry about that. When I'm reading my reports, I have to sort of come off screen so that I don't lose my signal. I apologize.
Okay, that's everyone present except Councillor Strickland.
Okay, thank you. Today, many across our region are dressed in purple to bring attention to child abuse prevention. Fitzmaurice of the Waterloo Region Record reported a story this morning that Family and Children's Services of Waterloo Region gets calls involving 5,000 families of 15,000 children over the course of a year. We know that children, youth, and families in Ontario are struggling now more than ever. We also know that the kinds of challenges that families are facing are wide-ranging, from food and housing insecurity to mental health and addictions to intimate partner violence. Today, we remind our community that there are places to turn. Thank you to Family and Children's Services of Waterloo Region for the support and hope that you provide that result in improved services and outcomes for children and families in our community. A special shout out to Jill Stoddart and Karen Spencer, who work in Family and Children's Services, who have taken Dress Purple Day to a whole new level and surpassed their goal of $5,000 fundraised for Family and Children's Services Foundation. So both are sporting their new purple hair today. And that was, you could see that on Twitter if you want to go search it and see the two of them in their purple hair for the day. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we do have a presentation or delegation today, just the one. And I will go to Mary Jane at this point in time, Mary J. Patterson of Reep. Mary Jane, there you are.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Chair Galloway, Regional Chair Redmond, councillors and staff. It's a pleasure to speak to you this morning and to share Reep Green Solutions Impact Report with you. We're looking back over the past year. Our fiscal year ended just as COVID began. And we're also looking at the accumulative impact of 21 years of Reep. I know you have the report, and we've got some slides with stats, so I'll let you read the stats and I'll just give you a little context around each one. And, oh, am I sharing my slides, or is someone there sharing my slides?
I think you have to do it, Mary Jane, if you can. I'm being told that we don't have it.
Okay. This will just take a moment.
Oh, we do have it.
Oh,
Sorry.
great.
We do have it. There it is.
Thank you. Okay. As you know, Reep Green Solutions is an environmental charity and social enterprise. Our goal is to help us all live more sustainably. Next slide, please. Our newest way to do that is through tree stewardship. For many communities, the majority of their urban forest is on private property rather than municipal property. And if they want to increase tree cover, they must work with homeowners, and that's where we come in. We're very happy to be working with Kitchener and Cambridge to support residents in planting new trees and learning how to care for the existing trees on their property. So here's our results so far. Our first year under our belt. The tree planting was held up this spring by the COVID lockdown, and we have just caught up this fall, getting the backlog into the ground. Next slide, please. Now onto water conservation. We're in our sixth year, I believe, of providing free water audits on behalf of the region of Waterloo. These are for high water use homes or for those interested in the region's new water softener plumbing rebate. These audits were also held up for a few months due to COVID, but we are back at it now with very careful precautions in place. We also work with homeowners on saving water outside the home to show how to manage stormwater so that it can soak into the ground and restore our groundwater and doesn't become runoff that pollutes our local waterways. What's cool about this work is the way it also helps people make a healthy, beautiful yard at the same time and often solves the problem they're having with flooding. Next slide, please. Here is another project that works to restore groundwater, prevent flooding, and reduce runoff, DEPAVE Paradise. We love the DEPAVE Paradise projects we've been able to do in the region. It's pretty cathartic working with volunteers to rip up pavement and put in plants and trees that bring beauty and shade to the area. So far, we've worked with 2 schools and the Board of Trade in 1 township, and we've been able to bring the funding that supports our side of the work, organizing and coordinating the project. Next slide. Now here's the work that you know us for the most. In the past 21 years, we've evaluated the energy efficiency of 17,000 homes in Waterloo region. Half of them have followed through on our recommendations to install energy upgrades, and their actions have reduced to 27,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions, reductions that carry on each year thereafter. Looking to the future, we're working with our municipalities, including the region of Waterloo, to be able to provide low-interest financing for homes to encourage more and deeper energy retrofits. A newer initiative for us in the past couple of years has been Project Neutral, thanks to the region's support and bringing it to our community. This online platform helps us calculate our own household emissions and helps us figure out what to do about them. There's an entry point through waste, water, and travel, as well as home energy efficiency, so it has much broader appeal. You can see that over 1,500 people have logged on to learn more about emissions. We've had some great results with lunch and learns with businesses, helping businesses bring this as a benefit to their teams. And these have carried on to a lesser extent, but still happening through the virtual realm. Next slide, please. Our energy work in particular is in direct support of our local climate action plan and our long-term target to reduce the emissions in Waterloo region by 80% by 2050. That's a big challenge, and in partnership with Sustainable Waterloo region and all the municipalities, we were able to bring 2 years of funding to help create the long-term action plan to reach that target. You can see here all the consultation with the community that's helping us to build that plan. The funding has also allowed us to bring capacity building workshops for municipal staff on topics like energy storage, carbon budgeting, and embodied carbon. And we still have those recordings for anyone that would like to see them. We hope to have an action plan that we'll be bringing to councils in the winter. Next slide, please. A big part of what we do is community outreach in many different ways, including the very exciting Zero Waste Challenge. Waste Reduction Week in Canada began on October 19th. Yesterday was the last official day of the 7-day Zero Waste Challenge. This is such a neat way to join others in paying attention to our waste and what we can do to reduce it. For just 7 days, anything that can't be composted or recycled goes into a mason jar. Chair Redmond and Mayor Jaworski, it's been delightful to see your posts on social media about this. I want to say thank you to everyone who participated and shared on social media this year. That's leadership in the community, showing that this is important, and it's been wonderful to see. I'm taking part in the 30-day challenge and I'm closing in on the finish. You can see that my jar is in a little bit of trouble here, and that's okay, because that's the point of it, to learn from what's going on in this jar and think about how I can shop differently to reduce it. So I've identified a little Ben and Jerry's problem that I have to pay attention to now. Next slide, please. Donations are incredibly important in helping to support Reep's work, especially for unfunded initiatives like the Zero Waste Challenge. It's a way to directly support local environmental action, and we so appreciate our donors. Next slide. We are pleased to say that we returned to a positive balance this past year. In the last few years, we've been investing in program development, and that has come to fruition. We also really strive to have a diversity of sources of revenue as a way to build in some resilience. And we're really drawing on that resilience this year, with the impact of COVID causing some of our programs to come to a halt for a few months. Next slide. You really get a sense of that diversity in programs and partners from this slide. These are all the different partners we've worked with in the past year for our programs. And this wealth of collaboration is absolutely key to our success. Last slide, please. So I'll end with our most important message. Thank you. None of the work we do in Waterloo Region would be possible without your support, Region of Waterloo, as a core funder of our work, as well as a project funder the last 2 years for Project Neutral. We are so grateful for that. It gives us the capacity to create and go out and find programs to bring to our community and keep them going. So thank you for that support. Together, we're helping people live more sustainably.
Okay, thanks very much, Mary Jane. Any comments or questions? Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Galloway. Through you to Mary Jane, thank you for this. I always am so proud when I hear the great work Reep is doing. Mary Jane, what is the process if municipalities want to depave places? I know you said there's 3 schools in 1 township. Is it a resource issue, staff issue, or interest issue that there aren't more people using that program? I think it's pretty exciting and transformative.
Well, we have access to some funding through our umbrella organization, Green Communities Canada, which continues to look for pockets from Trillium, the federal government, for its members. And so the funding is for public land or like churches, schools. That's the kind of property that's usually targeted, not so much private property for us to be able to organize it for you. And then they bring the funding for us to do that coordinating work. And it's really finding a site where people are ready and willing. So this is still open. We could do another one. There's enough funding. And I just saw an application that went in to try to extend to get funding for another one after that. So we have the resources and the capacity, and it's just connecting with people who are interested in having this done at their church or school. And Wilmot Township, New Hamburg, we worked with the Board of Trade, so that was pretty cool.
Okay, I wanted to ask a question as well, Mary Jane, on the depaving project, which I find very interesting. Have you had any contact with Dr. Susan Tai at the University of Waterloo, who is a pavement, world-renowned almost pavement specialist? And her research, she was researching a whole variety of things relative to asphalt, but one of them was she was developing a pervious asphalt.
Wow.
If you haven't made contact with Susan, she has some really interesting ideas on how to she was also researching using asphalt and pavement as a collection for solar energy. So I'm not sure where she is with all of that research, but anyway, I just thought maybe it would be a contact you might want to make with.
I think that would be good. How do you spell her last name? Is it Tai, like T-I-E?
T-I-G-H-E.
Okay. It's sounding a little familiar, but I'll check with Patrick, who runs our green infrastructure programs.
Yeah, she's now she's been bumped up in the university. She's kind of in charge of research and that, but that's her specialty. So it might be, and she's very good at coming out and reviewing things with people. So that would be a possibility. Anyways, I also want to add my thanks to you and the Reep board and all your volunteers and staff for the great work that they do in our community, extending a lot of our programs in water efficiency and waste reduction, and others that have a direct link to our program areas. So appreciate all the work that you do that really benefits the community in general, but also extends and leverages some of our operations here. So thanks, Mary Jane.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move to the consent agenda. There are 5 items, including the newest one from the addendum agenda. Did anybody want anything removed or discussed? Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I have a question about the late edition 5.5.
Okay, just a question? Okay, go ahead.
Just a question. The report refers to collaborating with area municipalities. I know that the city of Kitchener is also doing an inventory of their surplus land that might be used for this purpose. I'm wondering what other municipalities are involved in that exercise.
Okay, is Douglas or Ryan on the call that could answer that?
Yes, I'm here, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I missed the last part of the question. It cut out.
Elizabeth, you want to, Councillor?
Sure. Thanks, Douglas. Yes, I know that the city of Kitchener is working on an inventory of surplus land for affordable housing, and I'm wondering what other municipalities might be doing the same thing.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair. We have. We're working with the other municipalities, some more quickly than others. The city of Kitchener, the city of Kitchener is probably out ahead of everyone else. The city of Cambridge has been working with us. We've been talking with them about what possibilities there are moving forward. The intention is to bring all of the stakeholders together on November 9th at a planning table to talk about moving forward with potential plots of surplus land and or lands that municipalities and the region have available for the purposes of housing. So it is in the works. We're not at the same point with everyone yet, but we are moving in that direction.
Just one follow-up.
Go ahead.
So the report also makes reference to transit-oriented housing development. Does that preclude the townships that may not have the kind of transit we're talking about?
No, the reference to transit orientation, and I could defer this to my colleague Rod Regier, but it specifically speaks to properties that we may be acquiring related to Phase 2 LRT and expansion of Express and a variety of other modes of transport. So it doesn't necessarily exclude the townships, but it obviously doesn't include them in the way that it would the cities.
Right.
The expectation when we get together on the 9th of November is that we'll have the same conversation with the other cities, or with the 4 townships that we've had with the 3 cities about, are there surplus lands or are there regional surplus lands that would benefit the townships where we could actually assist in expanded social housing or community housing within their borders.
Thank you.
Mr. Lochner, you wanted to?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. CMHC has provided an opportunity in the federal government by November 27th to submit applications for housing support. This is, as we understand it, 100% support of capital costs instead of financing. So I was talking with my colleague at the City of Kitchener this morning, and Kitchener is definitely further ahead than the other municipalities. So this is a significant time crunch, and I think through the mayors, anything that can be done to accelerate this, to get applications in on time. Other parts of the region, or sorry, not other parts of the region, other parts of the province have taken full advantage of this and will be. We'd ideally like to see land and an opportunity across all 7 area municipalities. But again, time is of the essence, and we've only got a couple of weeks to pull this off. So anything we can do to help and partner and accelerate this would be super helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Barbanovic?
Thanks, Councillor Galloway. And I'm not sure if it's sort of better to sort of speak to this here or speak to it as we get to the item on page 41, because they are kind of intertwined, and it's the investment plan combined with the land piece. But just speaking to the point that Mr. Lochner just made. This is something that is extremely important to us as a region, but also to the City of Kitchener in regards to the work that we've been doing and discussing for some time with regional staff pertaining to the possibility of additional funding for supportive housing with now the one-time money that's available. When we do compare ourselves to other regions, I mean, as an example, and this is where it's really the second report, so I appreciate you giving me the latitude to sort of cross the lines, but Peel as an example, with a population of 1.5 million, is getting 276.4 million in federal funds in RHI, and sorry, they got that for 2,240 housing units, and will be getting RHI funding. Ottawa, with a population of 1 million, has gotten 168 million for 700 units. Hamilton, which is similar to us, is actually looking, they're looking for 1.12 billion for 3,000 units. And so I'm raising this, and I think it speaks to Mr. Lochner's point around time being of the essence. Like this is once in a lifetime, one-time money. And I know in speaking with federal colleagues, we haven't been as aggressive as some of the other regions or areas of the province have been. And so there is an opportunity here. As our staff have been talking with regional staff since November of 2019 on some of these housing issues. And council will recall I shared our Kitchener needs assessment with council about a year ago now, and it indicated there were about 750 homeless across the region and 450 in Kitchener. Our council is prepared to put some lands up. There was, the discussions between city and regional staff up till now have been that regional staff would look to do something similar in Kitchener. And I really think that as we look at this, particularly at the item on page 41, that investment plan should really look at more than what we're asking for right now. And certainly from a City of Kitchener point of view, and if we look at the conversations that we've been having, we'd be willing to put up 2 pieces of land. There's been talk of 2 pieces of property from the region, and I know that One Roof is also looking to be part of that funding, and we know we've got a gap in that space. So I guess my comment is, how do we sort of get from here to there by that deadline? And number 2, how do we make sure that we're getting for our collective region at least an equitable share to the dollars that we seem to be seeing going to other large urban areas in the province is the question, I guess.
Mr. Lochner?
Yeah, sure. And then Commissioner Bartholomew Saunders may jump in. To the question Councillor Vrbanovic put forward, the meeting on the 9th is intended to do just that, where we see the entire plan for the region. We've been trying to get it sooner, but obviously working with 8 organizations has been challenging with everybody's time commitment. So the 9th was the earliest we could get everybody together to share those plans. And that would be as a service manager, the regional plan. I think that's important that we put together a collective front from the region. As Councillor Vrbanovic said, we're competing with other parts of the province, and the strength, I think, is in the collective ask for 7 municipalities as a service manager. There is a risk, though, if everybody doesn't move forward at the same pace, that we don't get a regional solution, that we get one-offs, and I'm sure I'll hear that if that happens. So again, it's imploring all 7 municipalities to work together and move forward. Douglas, do you have anything to add to that?
Just thank you through you, Mr. Chair. The one thing I might say is that we have at the moment and Ryan may have to put the titles to the funding programs that these amounts come from. We have a commitment of a significant amount of money that's going toward housing already. The Rapid Housing Initiative has already committed $8 million, which I think compared to Hamilton's $1.4 million ask is quite significant. I acknowledge that it's not the $132 million that Ottawa has requested, but each service manager area is different, and the asks are going to be different, and the amounts of money are going to be different. The $8 million that's coming from rapid rehousing isn't all that we're going to get. There is the opportunity when we put in our spending plan by the deadline of the 27th to ask for more. So we will be doing that, and that was the point of bringing the entire region together so that we could make a collective ask. There's a further $3.5 million that we're about to use for capital build as well. And I apologize, I can't remember the name of the program that I think it might be the Social Service Relief Fund Phase 2 that 3.5 is coming from. So there's 11.5 million that we've got going forward right now that we're in the works of putting together. A lot of that will be dealt with through, or at least some of it will be dealt with through surplus lands, but we also have financing that has to go into the Waterloo Regional Housing Plan, which is asking for or intending to build 600 units. And that'll be upwards of $200 million right there. And that could be part of the ask as well. The whole idea was to bring everyone together so that we're making a region-wide collective ask rather than trying to look like we were a splintered eight municipality group going after bits and bobs of money and not appearing to be coordinated. That meeting is, as Mr. Lochner said, the November 9th, which gives us lots of time to get the application in for the 27th of November. The housing team is very adept at turning around applications on a dime. We've been doing it for 20 years. I think we can do this one as well.
Great. Well, I certainly appreciate that. So then as we deal with I guess this item and the subsequent one, I mean, is the intent that we would approve both of them today, or that in fact On the subsequent one, it really will come back to us once the meeting on the 9th has happened, and we're looking at hopefully the larger coordinated ask, because I do agree that I think having that one big ask from all 8 municipalities with the region leading it makes the most sense in terms of maximizing our dollar opportunities with our federal partners.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I apologize that I don't have the report in front of me, so I can't remember. If someone could tell me what the recommendation was, that'll help us know whether or not it was for information or whether we were asking for final approval. But I believe it was for information, and that we would come back again for final approval once we have the full ask. The other thing I would remind is that all of this money coming from CMHC and the provincial and federal governments would only come through to the service manager. So no matter how we do this, the money is coming through to the service manager, which is the region, and it would be parceled out to the projects from the region to the projects. So it has to come through the service manager no matter how we look at it. So I believe we're asking for, Ryan, can you actually, I know you're on the line, can you speak to the report from today? Are we asking for approval, or are we asking for approval in principle pending final approval after the joint meeting?
Thanks, Douglas. And through you, Mr. Chair, to answer the question about the alternative housing report, that is approval of the investment plan. So approval for staff to proceed with going forward with an expression of interest for the purchase of modular housing. And we require that approval to meet the provincial timelines that are attached to the funding. So that funding needs to be committed by the end of January, and construction and completion of that project needs to be finished by the end of the calendar year in 2021. So that's what's in that particular recommendation. It allows staff to proceed with going to the expression of interest stage to actually purchase the modular housing. And that's from the provincial funding envelope that was officially announced yesterday. What's happened in the meantime is the federal funding announcement of the RHI that we've also been speaking of. What we can do now that we have that information is when we go to expression of interest, we have the ability to add to that 3.5 million. But to answer your question, the priority was for us to continue to move along with the expression of interest stage to purchase modular housing. And we do have time in the interim to come back and dedicate a site that we would put the modular housing on. But first stage is getting to the purchase of modular for that 3.5 that we can now potentially augment based on some of the other funding announcements.
So just in that regard, just to be clear then, the recommendation right now is specifically only for the project that's already been envisioned. And we would need to do a motion to reconsider, or we would need to do a subsequent motion, or do we need to change something today? Because what my request would be, that as we deal with these, we keep in mind that that as a city, and I think many of you are aware, we approved our new economic development strategy yesterday, and part of that includes up to $15 million towards affordable housing initiatives. We would hope to see after that meeting on November the 9th, 2 city and 2 regional sites in the city, and the ability to include 1 roof in that. So, do I need to make an amendment today on that, or do we just wait till the meeting on the 9th takes place and it'll come back to, I guess, whenever our next council is after that?
It seems to me that the page 41 report, Councillor Urbanovic, is somewhat independent of what this broader discussion is, and if direction can be given to staff to bring back a report after the November 7th, if that's the date, meeting, and then we can give direction to bring that back, presumably to the next cycle.
Okay.
But it looks like
Okay.
the page 41 report looks somewhat independent of this new opportunity and the need to bring everybody together from all the municipalities.
Okay, that sounds good. Now, I do note though, and I guess in November we would have to, Chair Edmund might have to call a special meeting because it looks like our meetings in November after that date are focused around council strategy sessions and budget. So
yeah, that may well be.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you,
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Hopefully this is just a quick question, but you know, I understand the short time frame on this, and from the way the discussion has gone, I'm assuming the townships are included in that November 9th meeting. And I know from the Woolwich point of view, we don't have a lot of land holdings, but we do have staff sitting on a township-wide committee that includes our social services to look at the needs in the township. So I just want to make sure that particularly David is up to date on where things are at, and so we can have an overall plan that includes the townships.
Okay. Councillor Rentz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think we're jumping around there a little bit, and so I'm still a little bit confused, but we have the 4 township mayors here. Do they have a land that they're prepared to put up for discussion? Or, I mean, we're waiting for this meeting for the 8 municipalities to get together to talk about it, but does everybody have something to bring to the table, I guess is my question.
Well, I guess that's what the November 9th meeting is going to determine, I think.
Well, they're all four of them are sitting right here. Maybe we can hear from each one. I'd be interested to know.
Okay, if you wish, Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Yes, my staff last week had just done a compilation of the lands we do have for this.
Councillor Nowak.
Because we were approached by a developer wishing to look into it.
Councillor Nowak.
Yeah, we have identified some land that has some potential for development in both Linwood and St. Clements. It's a little premature to say that it would move forward. We will be meeting with the community members mid-November. We have some public forums planned to see what the folks in those towns would be interested in. One of the other issues that we have is a shortage of seniors type housing. So whether we can combine the two or not would be something that we'll have to iron out yet. But we do definitely have some land that would have some potential.
Councillor Armstrong.
No, I'm not aware that we do have. I would have to check with our planning department, but I'm not sure that we do have any land. If we do, I'm not sure how suitable it is, but I would have to check into that.
Okay, Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. We have one parcel that I'm aware of. It's a smaller parcel, but it is in the township's ownership. We also have a couple of other parcels that we've been looking at whether there's potential to acquire them. So there's also a number of grassroots organizations that are looking at affordable housing. And so, you know, there may be opportunities to partner. But the most important thing is that we're not working at cross purposes, whether or not we have land available currently. We are looking at that issue. And so we need to be all coordinated in our approach.
Okay, Councillor Rentz. Councillor Erb. Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to staff for working with these deadlines again. I know it's not easy. The deadlines are there, but I think the collaboration is significant if we're going to make a difference in this housing. And so thanks for doing it. I did have one question related to the report, probably to Mr. Regier. In a couple of places in the report, it refers to public consultation, and I'm wondering. The public consultation on the region's part, is that related to disposing of surplus lands, or is the consultation if one of the area municipalities purchased it and there has to be a zone change or something of that nature? Like it's in 3C of the report and a couple other places.
Yep, through you, Chair Galloway. There will be a requirement for public consultation on a site-by-site basis, provided that there are zoning and planning amendments required. I would point out that those are processes that we would need to work closely with area municipalities on as well. And I mean, it's very encouraging to see that all the municipalities in the region are on board with a collaborative approach here, because there will be some significant planning challenges on some of these properties.
But planning would be at the and the approvals would be at the lower tier level. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Galloway. Some of the points I wanted to make have already been made, but the CAO, Bruce Lochner, and I have talked to all of the townships and the urban municipalities, and this topic has come up at every conversation. So while all area municipalities may not be on the same page, what we heard very clearly is that there is need throughout all area municipalities in every corner of the region. So I think as we go forward, if we can take stock of what can be doing expeditiously and making sure that we're trying to address the broadest need possible, are those conversations that have to happen, recognizing that we may have to expedite them and people may have to turn their thoughts to them a little bit more quickly. But there is need throughout the region. That's been very clear in all the conversations we've had.
Councillor Jowett.
So I'm going to turn my screen off so I don't freeze, okay? So I apologize for that ahead of time. And I agree. Thank you, Councillor Erb, for discussing the collaborative imperative. I'm looking for an explanation, and I'm not sure whether, I think it's maybe Douglas is our best bet. Can you explain the competitiveness of this funding dispersion or appropriation, like as big cities separately versus as a regional request? You know, where do we sit in the theory? Because here's what my fear is, and it might help you respond. I fear that if we're fragmented in any way, that could actually perpetuate us getting reduced funds. Like I really feel like that's problematic for us. Can someone sort of explain to us on a conceptual sort of, here's the money, if we go in, we're positioned this way, one of X, but if we go in as a regional government, it's this. Can we get a little bit more of a nailed down version of what that looks like?
Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll start off, and Ryan may be able to give a more detailed understanding of the differences. I think the important thing to recognize is that these funds come through the 47 service managers across the province. So when we talk about places like Ottawa or Hamilton, they are single tier entities, and they are both the service manager and a city. Whereas in regions, we are, as you know, a region that has within it several municipalities. The money, even if we were to attempt to get money for a single municipality within the region, it would still come through the region because the region is the service system manager. attempting to fragment it into 8, or in the case of Niagara, 12 municipalities only demonstrates to the funder that we're fragmented and that we're not working in any kind of collaborative process. Our intent was to try to make this as broad an ask as possible so that it covers the entire region and that we're addressing the needs of the region. One of the reasons that we've done this is I'm cognizant of the many times where we have moved forward with initiatives in any of the portfolios within community services where the regional councillors from the townships have asked, what about the citizens in my and I have been more and more talking to the directors about the fact that we do have 7 municipalities within our region and that we need addressing the needs of all 7 areas. And to your point, Councillor Shantz, Mr. Brenneman has asked me to bring my team to that committee that you were talking about. We will be working with David and the nonprofits in Woolwich to address the very needs that you've talked about. The other point that I just want to make while I'm talking before I turn it over to Ryan to be more eloquent about how the funding works is that we're not necessarily talking about the townships having land to offer up. We need to remember that the region may have land within the townships that we want to put up for housing, and that it would be pointless for us to put it up for housing and decide what's going to go on it in the absence of consultation with the townships. So it doesn't matter whether the townships have property or not. The question is, does the region have property, and what makes the most sense for the needs of the township? In the same way that we would look at it in the cities, we wouldn't just take regional property and say, well, we're going to throw up a shelter sitting over here, or supportive housing sitting in this particular location without having first consulted the municipal council. So it's much broader than simply saying, do you have land that you'd like to put something on? It's a collective look at the whole process as we are one big family, if you want to look at it that way. Mr. Pettipier, could you perhaps speak to the funding pieces as asked by, I've forgotten who it was.
I believe it was Councillor Jowett.
Thank you,
Douglas. So I'll keep going, and thanks for that. And I think if I may, and respectfully, where some of today's confusion might be is, well, really we're talking about 3 different funding pots that have come out at different times with different acronyms, with different timelines associated with them. So I'll try my best to be succinct and just provide some clarification. One funding pot is through the National Housing Strategy Co-Investment Fund. That is an application-based funding pot that is available for the entire country. That is the pot of funding that we are intending to access through our Waterloo Regional Housing Master Plan that was approved a year ago. That's going to be our big and significant ask through application-based funding of, as Douglas alluded to earlier, over $200 million once that application is complete. That's comparable to the request and approval referenced earlier from Councillor Verbanovich regarding City of Ottawa and their hundreds of units and $168 million. That's that same pot of money. Moving on to today's agenda, the $3.5 million through the Social Services Relief Fund, that was allocation-based funding through the pandemic. So the provincial government has allocated that to us. On today's agenda specifically is the second iteration of that funding that we have allocated to helping us through our expanded emergency shelter system, but also now trying to get through those additional emergency shelters with creation of modular housing, which was an eligible expense under that funding. That second iteration of the funding was notionally allocated and subject to approval based on a business case that we had to submit. The investment plan component of that business case is what's on today's agenda and will allow us to continue to proceed as previously mentioned. The latest funding that we're now discussing that will become official through a national announcement later this morning is made up of two streams. It's made up of one that is allocation based to large urban cities. And there were only 15 cities or city centers, including regional centers across the entire country of Canada that will be in receipt of allocation-based funding. The allocation-based funding was split up of $500 million and allocated versus various through to those various 15 centers. And it was done on a calculation basis based on size, number of homeless population, and some other metrics as well, and then allocated to those 15 large urban centers. There is another $500 million that is available through application-based funding. And that's some of what we are getting at today in terms of coordinating a larger regional ask that would get submitted by November 27th on behalf of the region in meeting the needs of our various municipalities that can be added to that. So that's, again, all of what we've been bantering around the table today. And I hope provides some clarity about what's rolled out, how it's rolled out, and where we're going next with some of these pieces of funding. Thank you.
That's great, Ryan. I'm just wondering if maybe you can do a one-pager on that, some kind of a graphic or whatever to have all those different programs, the amounts of money that have been allocated or could be applied for, timelines and so on. So we can try to keep it clear. It's great that we have all this opportunity, but it is a bit confusing. Councillor Lawrence.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. That seems like an awful lot of money, and I'm just kind of wondering. I guess we're all paying for it, so it's probably a good thing. Just getting back to the townships and the land, Mr. Bartholomew Saunders had said that the region has possibly surplus land in the townships. And I hope that if that is the case, that all of us on council get a chance to see what we're talking about and have a good understanding of how that would work. Because I suspect that some of the regional land may be a little controversial for citizens in the township. So I know this is a difficult process, but it also seems to be on a pretty fast track. So I think we need to look at it. I don't know if it's before the 9th. I guess if we go in and try to horse trade on the 9th, I'd like to know what regional lands that we have in the townships that we're going to talk about putting on the table. So I'm wondering if that could happen, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lochner?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Let us take this away. I can assure you that Regional Council will be fully in the loop. It will be a plan encompassing the entire region. So whether a meeting happens before or after the 9th, if we could take that away through you, Mr. Chair, and perhaps even a special meeting of council is warranted, we might be able to link it in with the deadline of November 27th. So again, if I could take that away, I'd appreciate it.
I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay, no further questions. So it's moved by Councillor Verbanovic, seconded by Councillor Strickland. This is the approval of the consent agenda. And if you would vote.
Councillor Galloway, just noting Councillor Strickland wasn't here when we started, so I don't know if he's here now.
He was.
Okay.
That's carried.
He was just in the dark, that's all.
Yeah.
Not the first time, apparently.
Looks like he's in the shadows, actually. We'll go to the regular agenda now. There are no presentations for any of the items, but we can certainly have full discussion on them. The first item from Community Services is the emergency shelter planning update. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. I got a little lost in all of the numbers. I'm just not quite understanding why our 2021 budget requirement for emergency shelter would be $2 million less than our 2020 actuals, given the fact that we've doubled our shelter numbers just in the last couple of weeks for the next 12 months. Perhaps I'm misreading it.
So Douglas or Ryan?
I can perhaps give that one a try, Mr. Chair.
Or Mr. Dyer, go ahead.
So just looking at the table, I think it's just a matter of looking at two lines together. So if you look at the emergency shelter line and the service provider staffing supports line,
I saw that.
As I look at it now, it might have been better to combine those two together, and you'll see the increase in total in 2021.
Okay, that was my second question, so you've combined them into an answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, no further questions. There's a recommendation there, moved by Councillor Shantz, seconded by Chair Redmond. Go ahead and vote. And that's carried. The next item is the matter that we've already had some discussion on page 41, the alternative housing investment plan, which has to do with the modular initiative. Councillor Lorentz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I had the opportunity to go out to Lot 42 and look at the little houses. I was quite impressed as a good model to begin with, but I'm kind of lost on this modular housing stuff. Do we have any more information or how this would proceed, what it looks like? Because I don't really recall seeing it, or I know we've discussed it in the past, but now that we're getting closer, I'd be interested to see how it works, what it looks like, what it accommodates. Is it insulated? Is it whatever it is? Do we have that information that we could pass on?
Is that for Ryan?
Ryan, go ahead.
Sure, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's information we can share, Councillor Lorentz. Very quickly, modular housing. There's a variety of types, but by and large, once constructed, it can look like any other apartment building that you would see as a part of a traditional build. The advantage with modular housing and why it's been an eligible expense of some of the recent funding announcements is the fact that it can be prefabricated, built in factory and assembled on site, so that you're able to get it constructed and occupied much faster than you would a traditional build. But we can share some of the briefing notes and one-pagers we've developed on the topic around with council.
Yeah, I think everybody would be interested to see what potentially it could look like, just the module itself and all together. And I don't know, once it's built, can it be moved somewhere else, or is it permanent after that, or is it very flexible? I don't know.
Thank you, and again through you, Mr. Chair. The intent with it is that it is going to be permanent housing. That some of the modules, depending on how it's constructed and assembled on site, would have the ability to be moved more so than a traditional build. But by and large, we're looking to utilize sites that would be permanent housing for individuals where possible. With the caveat that should we find an infill lot on a temporary basis, that might work for the purposes of moving. But moving it around also comes with significant expense. I mentioned the disruption to the occupants of that unit as well. So our first focus would be to find sites that would be available for permanency, as well as construction permanent units on those sites.
So last question, Mr. Chair. Ryan, it seems to me that we have some kind of a module in mind. So how many different varieties are there, and what will ours look like? I mean, I don't think you need to answer that today, but I'd like to see that kind of information if we do have it, or are we going to be experimenting with different types?
Through you, Mr. Chair, what the report is requesting and referencing is that we go to an expression of interest, so that we would put out our requirements. We would seek bids from manufacturers of the product. We would then have a chance to evaluate. And at a high level, what we'd be saying is, depending, we would be applying our own design standards, as well as those of the cities or townships where this would be developed, to the proposals that we receive. So it would be high quality, and our intention is that it would be some place that we'd be proud of constructing and developing as a region, as a city, as a township, and someplace that people would be pleased to live in.
What is the timeline on all of that? We're looking at the end of next year. Is that the whole idea, or can it move quicker than that?
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, the timelines specifically, we need to commit to a proponent with the funding by the end of January, and construction needs to be complete by the end of the calendar year of 2021. So timelines are tight.
So you think that's doable, the way municipal government operates, that we can do that in the next 3 months?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is our intent, and we plan to move quickly to make best use of these funds, and we have some aggressive timelines, but we're confident that we can do it with collaboration and cooperation, and we think that it is the best way to move forward in addressing some of the significant that we're seeing, both in community services, in affordable housing, and through our emergency shelter system.
Wow. Okay, thank you. Looking forward to looking at what some of the models could potentially be. Thank you.
Councillor Jowett.
I'm going to apologize. That hand is up from the last vote. That's how slow my computer is. I apologize.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. This is another area where there's a lot happening at the same time, which is great, but I think it's also confusing. So I have an understanding, and I'll share that, and then you can correct me or confirm it. I think we're talking about two different things when we're talking about alternative housing at this point. I understand that we have a plan here for permanent housing that is simply going to be an alternative form of construction, but permanent housing. That's something we're piloting in Cambridge, or about to pilot in Cambridge. But I think we're also talking about piloting a sort of tiny home model for shelter, are we not? But separately.
Ryan.
Thank you, Councillor Clark, and through you, Mr. Chair. No intention on piloting a tiny home for emergency shelter at this point. Okay. Not to say that that's not necessarily in contemplation or in our future. Right now, we've been just under an exercise of expanding and trying to get capacity right with what we have and what we can find. Our next iteration of the emergency shelter system is part of a larger visioning exercise that we plan to do throughout the next 6 months as part of our overall exit strategy from the capacity that we have right now. Part of that plan and that longer term vision will include transitioning from emergency shelters to some of these modular developments. Tiny homes on a piece of property is not off the table and part of that exercise, but no concrete plans to put that forward or pilot that over the next 6 months, I can say.
So what we're looking at here really doesn't bear much resemblance to Lot 42. It's a different creature.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, and again through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that is correct. So the report on both the emergency shelter and the alternative housing today really just iterates where we're at currently with our emergency shelter system, and part of how we want to start to focus on permanent housing solutions as our primary focus on reducing shelter capacity overall.
Thank you.
Councillor Erb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, with these, with all these reports today from planning and community services, the provincial announcement yesterday, it's obvious there's a lot of balls in the air at the same time, and I hope we're able to keep them going. But it's I think it's just a recognition that the wind is probably at our back to create more affordable housing in the community, and we have to. And this whole concept of the housing model that we're trying to want to support here, I hope it's a recognition that we want to build ourselves out of shelter spaces. We need to find an exit strategy from shelter care so that we can offer permanent housing to some of the most vulnerable in our community. And these modular homes hopefully is one way of doing that fast. And we see it as a bit of a pilot project like we're looking at in Cambridge and also in on Beechwood Drive in Waterloo. And we know one size, one doesn't fit all, but for the majority of people, safe housing is the foundational piece of determining the social determinants of good health. And so I think this is a major step forward in a way of exiting our shelter system and looking for something more permanent.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Galloway. I just want to pick up on some of the comments Councillor Erb just made, and I was particularly interested, and it's something that we carry forward to AMO, and anytime I have the opportunity to speak to any minister in the provincial government or federal government, I talk about breaking down the silos. And if you look at the second bullet under, I think it's on page 42 under 3, as well as the bullet on 5, we really do have to set people up for success so that they need to have those ancillary supports that need to be there when they get out of the shelter system, and they may need supportive housing. So we have to continue to break down those silos and be very cognizant that the operating funding needs to be there, both to provide the services that people need to be successful, but also to make sure that they can invest back in the stock. Because what we see with Ontario Housing of 30 or 40 years ago is that all of those buildings became very run down because people weren't putting money back in to keep the facility up. And at the end of the day, up with places nobody would want to live. So I think those, as we go forward, not only do we have to be innovative and we have to be sort of quick off the mark in taking advantage of this funding, we have to do it smart. And we've got lots of lessons learned. So those are issues we need to continue to take forward to the provincial government as well as the federal government.
Councillor Urbanovic.
Thank you very much, and lots of good questions and comments. Just building on, I think it was Councillor Lorenz's questions around the kinds of units we're talking about and so on. I guess I'm more wondering, do we have any sense of ability towards supply? And you know, where my concern becomes is that, you know, if all of these municipalities are going to all of a sudden be, you know, in the queue, either, you know, at the same time as us, behind us, ahead of us, do we have a sense of, you know, what the ability of these manufacturers are to actually deliver on this in the timeframes that are being contemplated by the federal government?
Mr. Petitpierre.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Urbanovic, and through you, Mr. Chair. It is a question and a bit of a concern. We've been doing some diligence in contacting various manufacturers across the province, as well as other service managers that have gone through the process. There are fewer service managers that are actually pursuing this route, but there are several larger ones as well. We think, based on our contacts, that it's going to be doable, and it's also part of going through the expression of interest process, and that we would create an agreement that the units need to be delivered by a certain time, and they have to demonstrate the capacity to deliver the product by that timeline. So there's a number of ways that we can control that. What's going to be available and who's going to respond to that expression of interest remains to be seen. What we need to do specifically for the first part of the 3.5 million is find somebody that we can commit to by the end of January as a priority, and that we hope that they're going to be able to deliver the product when we define a site as early as possible. That's the best that I can give. Some of the capacity of the manufacturers themselves is harder to pin at this point.
Well, and I guess just building on that, Ryan, depending on what comes out of the meeting on the 9th, and ultimately the funding we may be going for and what we may need to build fairly quickly, is there a scenario where we may actually go to several manufacturers as opposed to just one in order to try to accommodate it? I mean, I know we have at least one company that I'm aware of in the region that I believe that does this work. And then there's others, presumably not elsewhere in Ontario.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, absolutely. That's a scenario we can consider based on the capacity and the responses that we receive. So first step is getting our investment plan and priorities lined up to secure the funding, and then going out to expression of interest, request for proposal at that point. But in order to meet the demand, it's entirely possible that we use multiple proponents to meet that request. There are a couple of local providers, as well as some larger national manufacturers as well. So it's an increasingly popular and in-demand form of housing construction, and a lot of the manufacturers will be gearing up their operations in light of some of the recent funding announcements as well. So long answer to shortly say, yes, it's possible that we would use several proponents to deliver on what we require.
Great, thank you. So, well, in light of my comments on the earlier one and this one, I'm certainly very supportive of this. I think, us moving forward together is extremely important. It builds on Chair Redmond's points around, knocking down the silos, and it also, I think, builds on Councillor Erb's comments and vision that, ideally we get out of the shelter business. I mean, I think we're a long way away from there.
Get out of the shelter business.
But we, it would be certainly wonderful if we can, be at a point where we, someday have housing available for everyone, which would be excellent. And that becomes really key for us, I think, to start dealing with some of the other challenges that some of these residents have, particularly on the supportive housing end of needs, is mental health and addictions, which we know is only growing. And the first step to dealing with that is getting a permanent roof over their heads, so there's some stability. So thanks to staff for all the work that you are doing. I guess my last question, though, in light of that is, depending on how much happens, this is an area where we may need to get some staffing support. Ryan's only one person, and I know there's other people in the department. And I don't know if this is a question for Bruce or for Douglas, but if we do get a whack of funding coming in, is this an area where we can either second people from other areas or look at how we make sure that we have the necessary supports, both in the planning area from a neighborhood engagement point of view, and as well as just the work around seeing these developments come together, have the necessary staffing so that doesn't become a roadblock.
Mr. Lochner?
Yeah, if I could start with Douglas first, and then I'll respond.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that has been an ongoing discussion in the department and between community services and planning and Legislative Services, we recognize that as I think it was Councillor Clark who said that there's a lot going on here and a lot of work that's going on here. What we need is to build up our development arm. We have a number of folks who are specifically, or at least a few folks who are specifically dedicated to the work of development, but it's not nearly sufficient if we are to go into all of this development at the same time. And Mr. Regier and I have talked about how we would, through looking at the existing FTEs between our two departments, the skill levels are that we need, we would be able to potentially reallocate resources to ensure that the Housing Services Division has what it needs to be able to move on these developments and make them happen according to the timelines that we've built into them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Jowett.
So our chair spoke to something that I feel has always been somewhat problematic, and I don't know that we have some big solutions for this, but it's the sustainability of the supply or the inventory for housing. You know, like we talked to a lot of landlords who started to lose significant amounts of money because of repairs and damages and maintenance to their properties, and they're just not going to stay in the game for the long haul if we don't recognize a way to connect accountability for the property to the costs associated with that actually interfere with profitability, because I think that's part of the problem. That's another piece that sort of nullifies our inventory. You know, does anybody, like, I know Kayla Andrade started this landlord board in our area, which I found was quite fascinating because we really didn't have one. And some of those conversations happen there. Is it worth staff meeting with these folks? Do we have, I know we're limited with our funds and how we can appropriate them, but are we looking at the broader picture of this particular challenge?
Mr. Lochner?
Yes, thank you through Mr. Chair. It's a great question. We are going to be looking at all angles of this. What I might suggest, if this suits council, there's obviously a huge appetite for this topic. I'm going to suggest after the 9th that we set up a special council meeting to deal with both the issue of the 9th, as well as take some dedicated time. It'll probably be several hours where we can go over the comprehensive plan for the entire region, which includes both tiers and what they may have in terms of available land, our strategy, our partnerships, opportunities that we're looking at, to Councillor Jowett's point, and have a dedicated session in mid-November on that. So if that pleases council, that would be my suggestion.
Love it. Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, I think there'll be general consensus on that, Mr. Lochner, so we can plan for that after the meeting on the 9th. Okay, we have no further speakers. I just wanted to say that this is a really nice problem to have. After having a dearth of funding for so long, and the needs being so high for both the shelter system and affordable housing more generally, this is a really good problem to have, that we may have to switch, move some staff resources around to actually accommodate this. I think we all realize that even what we have seen and heard today and in the recent past and recent announcements will not eliminate the problem, but it certainly will help alleviate it, and that's certainly a good thing. It's moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor McGarry. The recommendation on page 41, if you could vote, please. And that's carried. The next item is the next item under in the Public Health Emergency Services is an information report on the 2020-21 influenza plan. Are there any questions to public health staff in regards to the influenza plan? Councillor Strickland.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks to staff and Dr. Wong for all the work you're doing. I'm hearing lots in the community, and we've seen it on media reports and various other social media outlets. What is the message to folks who are having a hard time getting access to the vaccine? And as we all know, there's going to be a much greater uptake in getting a vaccine this year than probably any recent years past. So, the pharmacies are struggling. I know some doctors' offices are struggling to administer the vaccine because of lack of supply, or maybe not lack of supply, but lack of access to supply. So Dr. Wong, what's the message to the community about the availability of the flu shot, and what can they do about it, and when will this become more of a concern than I think it is right now?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Strickland, through you, the chair. So we do know that in our region, like elsewhere in Ontario, there has been a significant demand for this for the flu vaccine, which is good news. But the current supply that has come to us to date from the province is not able to meet that demand. So the province is we've obviously highlighted this to the province, and they are doing their best to get us more supply as it comes in from the manufacturer. So I might see if Karen Quigley, who's on the line with us, might have anything additional to add. She's a little bit more up to speed with the details regarding the supply from the province.
Karen?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, councillors. As Dr. Wong has said, we do receive a staggered supply from the province. There are two distribution systems that are at play here. The pharmacy supply is connected directly to the Ontario government pharmacy via an established logistics system that they have in place. Public health takes responsibility for the storage and handling requirements. But in terms of supply for pharmacies, that's a direct agreement with the Ontario government pharmacy. The supply that we provide, it goes directly to healthcare providers, partners such as primary care, long-term care, retirement homes, acute care hospitals, etc. And we are receiving our shipment of vaccine as we normally do, so that they do stagger the shipments. So we get 2 auto shipments that is provided based on estimates that are established by the province. And then subsequent to finishing the auto shipments, we then put in regular orders. So right now, tomorrow, we'll receive our last auto shipment. And then starting next week, we will begin to submit orders. A lot of this is impacted as well by the manufacturing process of the different providers of the vaccine. So long way of saying some of this is normal to what we see in a normal vaccine season in terms of staggered supply of vaccine, and initial demand is often great up front of the program. That being said, this year, as you mentioned, Councillor Strickland, there is a enhanced demand to that normal level because of what we're experiencing with COVID. So we anticipate more vaccine will continue to flow. That being said, we receive weekly updates from the province in terms of the supply.
Thanks. Through you, Mr. Chairman. So is there anything we can do to expedite the shipment of vaccine in our community so that supply gets more in line with demand?
Through you, the chair, I don't believe so. This is a phenomenon being experienced across the province, and we're continuing to keep the province informed about the demand in our area. They are well aware, and we understand they're doing their best to try to accommodate that as much as possible. But it is provided to the areas in a proportional way.
Okay, so I get it. I mean, there's a process in place, and this year's much different than previous years. So what, we can't say to the public, hey, look, the province isn't shipping it quickly enough to meet the demand. So what is our message to the public and those thousands of people out there in our community who want the flu shot but can't get it? So are we concerned about this? Do you think that the supply will increase to the point where everyone who wants a flu shot will be able to get one by a certain date, and the risk of getting the flu will be contained? I think this is of some concern to members in our community, and I think it's important for us to deliver kind of message to let people know that they are going to be able to get the flu shot, or it's going to be a challenge. I mean, which is it?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. So yes, so the goal is the province's goal is to make sure that the supply can meet the demand. Normally, what happens is a lot of the supply and a lot of the flu vaccines are given in November, which is actually what's recommended, starting late October for the general population, running into the first few weeks of November. So we would ask people just to continue to try to get the vaccine in the weeks of November. I think some pharmacies or their physicians take appointments, so try to make an appointment or get on the list to get an appointment. And the vaccine, there will be more vaccine coming in the next few weeks, and we're asking people to just try to get an appointment for the coming weeks, and look for the supply in the coming weeks.
Okay, so thank you through, Mr. Chairman. So basically, be patient. We still have another month to make sure that everyone in our community who wants the vaccine is able to get it.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Galloway. I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. And I didn't go to my doctor's office. I think the physicians are kind of tied up, and the process is a little more stringent than it used to be. So I did go to Shoppers Drug Mart at Sunrise Shopping Center on the 20th of October. They didn't have vaccine. They told me that it would be coming in by the 26th. I could register online, which I did, and I got a key code. I went in yesterday. There was no lineup. I was able to get my super shot, and the whole process took about 20 minutes because 15 was waiting afterwards. So I think it worked really well. I think people just have to understand that they need to register or they need to make an appointment, and that way they kind of know that the vaccine will be coming. They told me that key was good for 7 days, but they had said the 26th the vaccine would be in, and it did happen that way. So I think of opportunities for the public to be able to go to different places, I think is a really good model. And I'm hoping that we can kind of get this figured out, because I would suspect it would be the same model that we would use when there's a COVID vaccine.
That's being worked on by the province, so we don't know yet what the model will be, but that's being worked on.
Okay, and I understand that the federal government has in a number of occasions looked at acquiring COVID vaccine when it comes out. How does that even work? Because we don't even know when it will come out. Do you have any inkling or
Yeah.
insight into that?
Yeah, we don't have any information at this point about, when it will become available and to which groups it will be available first, because it's expected that it won't be available for everyone right away. So, the federal government, the provinces are working on determining things like priority groups and, how best to proportionally distribute the vaccine to the various provinces when they start to get a supply. So as we learn more about that, we will keep council informed.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Galloway. I'm wondering if the mauve is confusing Councillor Ransom. That's why he keeps calling me Madam Chair. I have two questions. One is, can we clarify? I know it references Langs making the vaccine available to their roster. Whose responsibility is it to administer flu shots to the shelter population if they require it? And my other question I'll ask right now is the family flu, the drive-through for kids under 5, I thought was an amazing service. I know it got very subscribed, and I think Cambridge is planning another one. Is another one planned, or people with children under 5 now have to visit their family?
You want to take that, Karen?
Yeah, I can take that. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes. So in terms of the clinics, we will be looking at some limited appointments through the offices in both Cambridge and Waterloo for those who maybe are not able to access the mobile clinic in one way or another. And so hopefully that will help support the primary care providers and the walk-in services that are also providing to families with young children. In terms of the shelter services, Sanguine Health Center is providing support to distribution of flu vaccines to that vulnerable group. That hopefully will support the efforts to ensure that there's good distribution of vaccine for that population.
Thank you. So, Karen, is it fair to say then that there aren't going to be any more drive-through clinics for kids under 5, but it'll be the walk-in, make an appointment, and go with your child to get them vaccinated with the flu vaccine?
Either that or through your existing family physician. I know a number of primary care organizations have already done some proactive organizations for the young children and their families. And anyone 5 and over can go to the pharmacy.
Thank you.
Councillor Kiefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up with Dr. Wong on the fact that is it reasonable to assume that the reason they're short of high dosage amounts is that there's a greater population over 65 out there? I just wondered about that. I had a little trouble with mine, but I followed Councillor Lorenz's guide, and I got my shot yesterday after making an appointment. It took about a week.
Yes, thanks for the question. Yes, so the province did order additional vaccine, including additional high-dose vaccine, but there's been a great demand for that upfront, and so there hasn't been the supply for that as much to meet the demand. So we're currently the process of continuing to let the province know of the demand and asking them, what can be done going forward. But there will come a time when there isn't any more of the high dose. which is one of the reasons that people over the age of 65 were prioritized for receipt of that earlier this month. The other thing to remember, though, is that even if it's the regular flu vaccine, it's still considered effective for people that are over the age of 65. In fact, there's no evidence that the high dose is better for those over the age 65, but it is an option that is often preferred by people, which is why it's been so popular and the supply has not been able to meet the demand. But just to finish, I would recommend that people over the age of 55 just get the regular flu vaccine if they're not able to get the high dose. It's very effective, and the more important thing is for people to get a dose of the vaccine. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very
much. Dr. Wong. Thank you, Dr. Wong. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. We'll move on then to the finance report, the periodic financial report, updated year-end projections. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I did have a question about the various trends, the Safe Restart funding. As I understand it from the report, we received the phase 1, won't be eligible for the phase 2 because the phase 1 was adequate to cover our COVID expenses. But we do anticipate receiving phase 3. So I'm interested in why we anticipate that, and I'm also interested in the timing of those 3 phases.
Mr. Dyer.
Yes, thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. I think I should start off by saying at this point, phase 3 does not exist, and we're not anticipating anything at this point. I'll come back around to that in just, but just to make sure that we're clear on that. So we have 2 streams of Safe Restart funding. One is referred to as a municipal stream. One is referred to as a transit stream. So in both cases, as we've set out in the report, staff are of the view that we will not be eligible for phase 2 of either of those streams because, as you said, Councillor Clark, our 2020 COVID-related costs have not exceeded the amount of our phase 1 allocation. So in both cases, we expect to carry forward the unused funds in 2020 into 2021, which is actually extremely helpful for us as we put our 2021 budget together. And part of the reason we're able to do that, as we've set out in the report, is the result of the significant actions that the region took back in March, April, and May from a cost containment perspective. So we have been able to offset a significant portion of our COVID-related costs. The challenge that we have, particularly on transit, but also with respect to the shelter report a couple of reports ago, we have a similar set of recommendations in that report as to here. The unused transit funding, so whatever transit funding we carry over into 2021 has to be used by March 31st. And so the recommendation, we think we'll be able to do that, but for both transit and for the shelter funding in the previous report, it would be, unfortunate if we were in a situation where some of that funding had to be returned, because we know that neither the shelter costs nor the transit ridership and fare revenue problem are going to be over on March the 31st. And so what we're looking for in this report is some flexibility on the transit stream. So if we can't use all the transit funding by March 31st, allow municipalities to use it into April and May and June, early part of next year, but also looking to the province for some early indication of another phase of transit funding. Because this is shaping up to be one of our most significant budget matters for 2021. And it would be good to know, would be certainly good to know coming out of the provincial budget next week, that there is some indication that transit funding is going to continue past March 31st. So it's kind of a long way of saying phase 3 doesn't exist yet. We think it should exist, and we think it should be announced relatively soon.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Notwithstanding some of the issues for 2021 and some flexibility required for shelter funding and transit funding, I get that. But I think it's really important to note that these are numbers and on a spreadsheet on a page, but they're real dollars. And when we talked about this in the beginning of the pandemic, or near the beginning of the pandemic in June, we were projecting a $17 million deficit. So that was significant, unprecedented, unparalleled. And since that time, the region's done what we were able to do in terms of containing costs. The federal and provincial governments have come forward. And now here we are in October projecting a small surplus of $3.2 million. So I think it's a real testament to the unprecedented nature of the environment we're in right now with COVID, and how all governments have come together to deal with these shortfalls. So I think it needs to be marked that this is significant funding from the federal and provincial governments in unprecedented times. And to go from a projected $17 million deficit to a potential $3.2 million surplus, which is small based on the size of the region's budget, I think is remarkably good news, and it's good for our community, and of course it's good for all of Canada. We're going to have to deal with this down the road because the money doesn't grow on trees, but for now we have averted a serious budget crisis, and our regional staff, council, and federal provincial governments and politicians deserve a lot of credit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Brabanovic.
Thanks, Chair Galloway. And I was really going to make similar comments to those of Councillor Strickland. I think, at all levels of local government, whether we're talking the region or at the tiers here in Waterloo region, but in fact across the country, we're in a very different world today than we were at the beginning of the pandemic, because of the leadership of the federal and provincial governments, with the Safe Restart funding, as well as some of the specific programs around the shelter system, transit, and so on that have been made available. And I agree. Without question, this has been an unprecedented period of time, but it's also one that, as Mr. Dyer points out, isn't over come December 31st or come March 31st, and that is important. I can share with council that this is an area that FCM is continuing to work on from a federal government perspective, and the dialogue has happened already and will continue happening in the weeks ahead. And part of that is predicated on the notion that we are all in budget season, and our budgets don't end March 31st. Ours for municipalities generally end December 31st, and we need to have a sense of where we're going sooner rather than later going forward. So I know there are some significant meetings being worked on with the Big City Mayors Caucus in the next couple weeks, and I think we'll start getting a sense of where folks may be. But I think that the government is also starting to shift their heads, not just on these operational issues, but also a post-COVID economic stimulus / recovery program, which will impact us as well, and we're going to need to think about. So,
okay, thank you for those comments. I just want to reiterate also, Councillor Strickland's comments and thank staff particularly for the diligence that they have put into the process. And it is a modest projected surplus at this point in time. And hopefully we can get some relief from the province on extending some of those monies, possibly past their own fiscal year. And I kind of anticipate that that's hopefully going to be received positively. The motion is moved by Councillor Rentz and seconded by Councillor Kiefer. You would vote. And that is carried. The next item, Transportation Environmental Services, the Hesper Road, Munch Avenue, right turn on red prohibition. This comes as a request from people who remember the delegation Barry Green, who had a concern in that regard, and staff have found a way to, in part, alleviate the problem. Councillor Clark.
Thanks. I appreciate that by changing the hours of the prohibition, we can still reduce the number of cyclist collisions by 90%, but that means we're accepting the other 10%. And I'm wondering how difficult it would be to how difficult it would be to amend the bus schedule somehow so that we're not running into the problem of misconnections.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it would be pretty difficult. I believe, I'm not sure if Mr. Zink is on the line. He could possibly answer that better, but my understanding, this is a pretty significant route and it would be difficult for us to move it. The connection specifically for Mr. Green, that's very difficult to handle because it's not only this route you have to change, it's the other route that he connects to that you would have to change as well. The delay is actually very small. So if you do look at the numbers, I think the way I put it is it feels very different, the amount of delay, whether you're sitting in your comfy chair or if you have your hand on a hot iron, delay feels very, very different. So for someone standing in traffic, the 30 seconds of delay feels like a long time. But the actual delay, as staff, we were surprised that it was actually causing so little delay. We feel the change we've made will help and will still maintain the majority, 90% or more, of the safety that we want to achieve.
And if I'm reading the report correctly, that particular intersection averaged 1.6 cyclist collisions per year?
I believe that's every 5 years. I believe. I
thought it was a 5-year average.
So that would be, yes, yearly.
So by making this change, we would reduce it to an equivalent number of collisions every 6 years.
Yeah, I think you need to be careful with doing that math, but yes, we would. Yes, but the math, you have to be careful when you do that type of math. It's not quite that simple.
Well, you put 90%.
Yes, I know, but it's a question of the timing. It just collisions are not that predictive, and they are somewhat random. We do see, and you can see patterns in them, but it's really hard to say this measure is going to result in exactly this.
Okay, so the change from the AM hours is because we're not seeing as many. That's not as high a risk time for cyclist collisions then?
That's correct.
Okay.
When we get the data on cyclist collision, we get the time of day, all of that information. So all of that was looked at to make this.
Thank you.
I had a question a little more general on no rights on reds. There's a fair bit of discussion that's been going on recently in the community on social media about no rights on reds being a lot safer for pedestrians and cyclists. Is it a Highway Traffic Act matter, or is it, where does the legislative authority come from in terms of putting in no rights on reds? I mean, there are provinces, there are states in the United States that it's just no rights on reds are permitted anywhere. where is the legislative authority in terms of if we were ever to consider a total prohibition on right turns on reds?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe we would be able to do that, but I do have Mr. Henderson here, who is probably better informed on that. It is in the Highway Traffic Act, no question. The big concern in doing a general ban would be that would be completely out of step with the rest of the province.
Oh yeah, I understand that. That's a huge issue, of course, but
Mr. Henderson are you on, and is what I'm saying correct?
Yeah, Mr.
You
Henderson.
are, through you, Mr. Chair, you are correct in terms of it's a provincial matter within the Highway Traffic Act. In order to facilitate a full right turn on red prohibition throughout the entire region, we would have to install signage at each and every intersection to do that.
Okay. Yeah, that question's getting asked, so it is really something that the province would have to entertain. Or we could provide some advocacy if we so chose to towards that end. Councillor Kiefer, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With specifically speaking about Munch and Hespeler Road, I'm pleased that staff have come up with a form of a resolution there. I personally still believe that there shouldn't be a right-hand turn there, not just for buses, but also for cars. I still monitor I go by there once or twice a day, and I still monitor to see the cycling, and there's little to none cycling that's happening on that corner. That's my information. But my question to staff is, are we going to monitor the amendment there to see, in 6 months down the road if there needs to be a further change made, or is that not going to happen?
Through you, Mr. Chair, all of these were done as a pilot, so we will continue to monitor the change we've made.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Appreciate it.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Galloway. I just saw that Ms. Arnold unblocked her screen. I wondered if she had a comment on prohibition of right on red. Maybe she could contribute to the conversation.
No, thank you, Chair Redmond. I was just Bob Henderson's wingman on that question. And Bob answered it.
Okay. It's moved by Councillor Jowett, seconded by Councillor Jaworski. Please vote. And that's carried. We have a couple of other business items that we do want to spend a minute or two on, and one new one. And of course, members of the committee can also ask. But the one that we did want to spend a minute on is the Ion Light Rail Award of Excellence. Mr. Schmidt.
To you, Mr. Chair. And I do not have the award with me. I believe it's actually in the council chambers.
I am looking at it, yes.
So maybe there's the award. This is a 2020 Sustainable Community Award from FCM. So this is a national level award that we received for the ION project as a transportation project, but really we received it for the transformation that is doing in our communities. So quite an honor for us, and for staff, obviously, we're quite happy with receiving it. And I think council's contributions to that are also being recognized with this. So a great award for us to get, and very nice recognition.
Okay, on that matter, Councillor Clark, were you on that matter? No?
No, I'm on the letter from the city.
Okay, Councillor Rentz, are you on that matter?
No.
Okay.
I have something else.
All right. Okay, well, I'll just comment on that. Of course, it is always nice to get recognition for a project of this type and at a federal level. And I think it's not the first award that ION has received, and something I think that the region can be duly proud of. And this is certainly a recognition, a very significant recognition from FCM for the project. And so I'm glad to be able to receive that on behalf of council. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. My question was actually going to be of Councillor Brbanovic, but I think he's left us, in which case I'll see if maybe Mr. Schmidt can answer. I'm really curious about the significance of using the administrative monetary penalty system. And I recall, maybe incorrectly, that one of the reasons we are going with as few cameras as we are is because of concerns we have about the Provincial Offences Act court. The ability for them to deal with an awful lot of fines. Is this a way around that? What does it mean?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that it definitely would help us. So the AMP system would help us and would reduce some of the administrative burden on provincial offenses. So it is definitely supporting something we're pushing the province for.
Okay, is there any action that Region needs to take on this letter?
I don't think there's any action right now, but staff will review it and come back with a report to council on it, because it does, increasing the number of sites does have some impact. So I think we would bring that back so that we can respond appropriately.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wondering, I know we all participate in Remembrance Day ceremonies. Does anybody have any idea of what we're doing? Is there going to be some kind of a collective way that we can recognize a Remembrance Day through the region, or is every municipality doing something different? I know I used to participate in the parade and the ceremony, but is that still going to happen with COVID? Who would know that?
Yeah, I'm wondering who would know that. I guess the legions would know that, but maybe somebody.
Chair Redmond's waving her hand.
Oh, Chair Redmond, maybe she's got some info on that.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway, and thank you, Councillor Rentz, for raising this. We will be sending a memo out to all council members. Most Legions and Remembrance Day ceremonies are virtual. There are a few. Every in-person event is asking for one representative from the region. So we usually go out full force in numbers. So we will be sending around a information sheet that has a table that tells you all of the legions and what they're doing. Generally speaking, if I can't attend on behalf of the region, we've gone backwards till we found the first person in that municipality that was the chair designate, and I've asked them to do it. There are some legions and some cenotaphs where they're asking you just to drop by during the day, and they will put up the wreath. So there will be a full reporting out to all council members very shortly, letting you know exactly what the protocol is and whether or not it's a virtual or an in-person. There's very few in-person ones this year, but you will all receive that information.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Just back to the speed enforcement memo, or memo, I guess, from the City of Kitchener. And if there's a staff report coming from our staff, I guess a couple questions or considerations that I'd like to make sure are thought about and included. And one is that a lot of our schools are situated on regional roads, and in the smaller communities, the speed can be quite high, and so I don't know how you determine hot zones, but I would hope that some of those considerations would be in the report.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we will be looking, and we spent almost a year and a half discussing this program with the local municipal staff. So we will just reach back to the information we have from there and come back with a response to a letter.
Okay, and I'll turn the meeting over to Mr. Lochner, who wanted to have an opportunity to discuss something.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We have a potential media story brewing that I thought would be important for council to have heads up on. I'd ask maybe Mr. Storts to join me. He's going to have to help me through this. Brian, I'm sure that this story will hit the airwaves pretty shortly. Give me one moment, please. I put this logo up behind me just to provide some context in a moment. Before I turn it over to Brian, I just wanted to say that the story brewing is that Brian has 3 more sleeps until his last day here at the Region of Waterloo. After more than a couple of decades.
Had everybody worried there, Bruce.
Yeah, after more than a couple of decades sitting as chair, sorry, in the chair that many of you have here as regional councillor, and then as director of communications, this truly marks an end of an era. I've known Brian actually before I moved to the region for about 25 years, and Brian's been helpful to me as I moved into this region to get to know people. He's always been there when I had questions to ask, and then surprise, turned out that he found out I was going to be his boss, and he was kind enough to stick around to, I say in quotes, assist with my transition, or in Brian's words, to keep me out of something else. Brian joined the region as a young man, and well, now he's leaving a little bit older. You can see him here on the screen. All kidding aside, Brian, I just want to say whenever I see the ion, I think whenever anybody on this call sees the ion, as Mike Murray says, Brian was one of a handful of people who was part of that every step of the way. So I certainly will remember Brian having a role in that. Whenever you see that logo behind me, someone said I look like Game of Thrones or something, but no, this is a logo that Brian launched 18 years ago, back when he was just a youngster. He put a lot of heart and soul into this region or into this logo, and I think it serves the region really well. Brian helped do so many things during his career, and throughout it always demonstrated his love for public service and also for this community. I've never met someone with more passion for all things Waterloo region, Brian. The team wanted to give Brian a little something to help him get started with the book he's going to write. It's going to be a bestseller, and we all know the title. It's going to be called If You Don't Want Bad Press, Don't Do Stupid Things. So with that, Brian, I think someone has just knocked on your door.
Yeah, I've got people in my office. I don't know why.
Fully masked.
And so, yeah.
Fully masked. Brian, I wish you a wonderful retirement. I know Angela can hardly wait until Saturday morning, where you can wake up and do whatever you want. So on behalf of all the staff here and council, all the best, my friend. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks, Bruce, and thanks to all of you. The gift was you can't make this something up. So thank you. And this will be a good start to.
And this is from us.
Okay. And I have
it's all of your sayings, or most of your sayings that we've heard for almost 20 years.
Yeah. Apparently, I've got some legendary sayings, some of which can be repeated, but some can't. But thank you very much for those gifts. And thanks, Bruce. I appreciate those comments. If I could sort of just make a few comments. It's been a true honor to be part of the regional family for the past 23 years, 20 years as staff person and 3 years as a regional councillor. I was actually class of '88. I was reminiscing actually with Councillor Galloway this morning about that group, and with Councillor Lawrence. We were the two new kids, young, new, fresh faces on Kitchener Council way back when. And at that time, Councillor Galloway and Chair Redmond were both elected to the school board. So I think it was a pretty good class, if I may say so myself. The other person that was part of that group was this kid in IT who I think maybe off the screen now. He was this, the kid that came and set up your computer and was kind of, okay to work with. And he went on to become the mayor of Kitchener. So, from humble beginnings, again, good things for my friend Barry. The other person I'd like to recognize is Jim Erb, or Councillor Erb. We go back a long way. We go back, I guess, in excess of 40 years. And I recall working on that somewhat, I wouldn't say infamous, but fluoride plebiscite back in 1982. So, Councillor Erb, again, it's been a long journey with you as well. And again, I probably have stories for many others, but again, Jim, it's been again, we've been through a lot together over the years. So again, it's been great. like to say what a privilege has been to work with this council and previous councils. And I think that these councils have been visionary, they've been courageous, they've done things that other municipalities haven't been able to do in the province of Ontario. You've done so much together. There's been stellar leadership, both with former Chair Ken Sealing and current Chair Karen Redmond. So again, we've been well led and well served by this council again. So thank you on behalf of. I guess now that I'm going to be a regular citizen, I promise I will not be writing letters to the editor or posting things on any Facebook groups, especially those in Cambridge, Councillor McGarry. But again, this you serve this community very well. As Bruce mentioned, again, the LRT was built on this council's watch. There's been a progressive land use planning. The ROP has done good things to energize the urban areas, but also protect farmland. So again, kudos to this council for leading the way in those areas. And again, and the debate today regarding affordable housing was very uplifting. That and with all the progress this community has gone through over the years, you've never forgotten about the most vulnerable. And I think that again speaks volumes too when we opened the CTS site in Kitchener. But this council has always looked out for the most vulnerable in the community, and kudos to you. And I guess the big challenge now is coming out of COVID to make sure that no one gets left behind in this very again, this very key chapter in the history of this community. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some previous CAOs, our current CAOs, and our current CAO and corporate leadership team, and our corporate leadership team and our senior management team. Again, there's been terrific folks here on the staff side, provided great leadership. As Bruce, I was very fortunate. I've been actually very, very fortunate to work with good friends. That Jerry Thompson actually recruited me. He poached me from the Catholic School Board 20 years ago, and invited me to come to the region. And again, Jerry and he's invited us to go out and visit with them on Vancouver Island. And again, Jerry was always a very good friend and a great colleague. And Bruce, of course, again, as he said at the outset, that we've again been political allies for many, many years. And again, I came here because of Jerry, and I stuck around actually a little longer because of Bruce, because I obviously wanted to be here to help Bruce succeed. And certainly he has he's found his footing in these past couple months. But bookended by that was Mike Murray, who was my boss for 17 years. And just sort of maybe full disclosure that Mike at the beginning, especially when he was commissioner, was giving me lots of advice basically to stay out of his department. And then, of course, he became my boss. And we worked very closely together over those 17 years. And I think our professional relationship turned actually into a really good friendship. And we were up to see Mike and Fran about a month or so ago. And again, as we all know, he's just an outstanding person, and he's enjoying his retirement, and maybe he's even tuning in to this today. So hopefully he is, because again, it was just a real privilege and honor to work with someone of Mike Murray's stature for 17 years. Finally, I'd like to do a shout out to my team here. Some of whom are standing in my office, making me feel very uncomfortable. But I've been very fortunate to have my work family has been just outstanding. Again, every day coming in these doors has been a joy. We have, like any family, we have vigorous debates, but again, they've been just great folks to work with, and have been just great at making the communications and issues management role that we have in this office work very well. So again, thank you to my team for the great work that they have done and will continue to do. And again, they've accomplished so much over the years. And probably the biggest accomplishment is that they've actually made me look good, which is probably no small challenge. But just my final comments to you. Do well. I know there's lots of challenges ahead. Continue to make good decisions, and this community again is very fortunate to have this council lead it. So again, all the best, and I know good things will continue to happen. Thank you.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Galloway. Brian, I can't let you off quite that easily. And I have to say, I don't think most of us come to work looking for friendships, and I think that it's a testament to your character and your investment in your colleagues that you have so many friends. There's all kinds of Brianisms that will live long after all of us have left. And one of them is, if you can only make one phone call, don't order Chinese food. And I will leave it to all of you to ask Brian the backstory. As you know, the backstories are amazing. Brian actually played a very pivotal role in my political career. And when he decided to run for another level of office, he approached me and said, have you ever thought about running for city council? And I had said no. I went home and talked about it and decided I would run. And when I wasn't elected, I would decide what I wanted to be when I grow up. Well, I was elected. I'm still sort of trying to decide what I want to be when I grow up. But Brian, what you brought to regional council was the advantage of being on both sides of the table. You had been an elected official. You knew the trials and tribulations, the ins and outs. You've brought that sensitivity to the region, and it has served this council and all of our previous councillors really, really well. I used to always think that having been in public office, I would never want to be the guy making the snowballs for somebody else to throw, because if I was going to be in the discussion, I wanted to sort of put my name on the line. But I have to tell you, Brian, having served in both roles, when I went back to serve with Michael Ignatieff, there's a lot to be said for making the snowballs and handing them to other people to throw. So thank you, Brian, for making us and our predecessors look good, helping us work as a team, making and perfecting how to make those snowballs. And you know, it's funny because I said this to Mike Murray, and it's been true with you. We have worked you to your very last day. This entire council has felt a lot like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. And you were phoning me on Sunday morning because you were at work looking after some emerging issues. So your commitment to the community and to the region is stellar. It's lifelong. And on behalf of all of us, thank you. Job well done.
Thanks, Chair.
Very good. Okay. That is the last item then for our open session. We're now going to take a 10-minute break before we go into closed session. And I just wanted to let you know that staff are going to take a group photo. We're going to take a screenshot as soon as just before we start the closed meeting. So please be back on time to get in on the screenshot. This is for Purple Day. Okay, we'll be back in 10 minutes. Thank you.